WonderCon is making me do an announcement before we officially start. Some housekeeping, sorry. There's been a murder at this event. The good news is the police have said 2 editors and a WonderCon moderator are more equipped to solve it. So we're going to do the Q&A and solve a murder in lieu of Selena, Matt Marty, and Steve Martin. So thank you. I personally think it's one of the Pickwick triplets that did it. So let's begin. I'm Matt Ryan from Moderated by Matt. You can check out my YouTube channel, and this video will be on in a few days. I'm so thrilled to be here today to host Only Murders in Buildings, Solve the Editor's Mysteries. Let's please welcome Shelly, Westerman, and Matthew Barbato. Okay, Matthew, you were on season 1.
Yes.
Initially.
Yes, I was.
What was it like to come on board the show on the ground floor and help create the world and how it would look for the audience?
It was daunting at first. The show, one of the things we learned about the show pretty early on and continue to deal with is that it's this mix of mystery, comedy, and character moments. And that's a really hard thing to balance. But luckily the scripts and the performances kind of give us all the tools we need to figure it out. But yeah, that was the thing that we most had to figure out, when to keep the jokes, when the jokes were getting in the way of other things, and how to keep track of the mystery and stuff. But it was a fun challenge.
All right, so Shelly, you came on season 2. The show had found its style, which I thought was great, but you guys didn't want to duplicate everything. You didn't want to do a carbon copy. So what was your thing approaching a whole new mystery and a little different? They didn't want to redo season 1.
I think a lot of it is in the scripts, and it comes from the showrunner and setting the tone. And then a balance between the editors. Like, I tend to get more emotional and sappy and romantic, and my co-editor might say, oh no, there's a joke in there. I'm like, really? What? So we kind of help balance each other out, kind of with the comedy as well.
Well, that's interesting. We'll start with you, Matthew. Only Murders has drama, mystery, and comedy. You can't reveal any secrets. You don't want to weigh the drama down with too much comedy, less in it. So for you, as an editor, how do you approach the balance of all 3?
For me, it's just really instinctual. I try and honor what the scene is meant to do and what needs to happen in the scene in terms of whether it's a character drama. And the writers do pack these scenes with so much stuff, and you have so many options of what you want to play in it. And then I just kind of instinctually go off the performance and what seems to work, and in the end it's really just a gut feeling of whether the joke fits or not, or if it gets in the way. And then we talk with the showrunner about it, and they might have some ideas. But I think at this point we've worked with them long enough that we'll kind of shape the scenes the way we think they work, and play it for our directors and our producers, and we tend to get it right. Yeah, but it's really just reacting to it in the moment and building it for what you think it can be.
How about you, Shelly? What do you think?
Yeah, I would say a lot of times, especially with the comedy and the jokes, you might watch it 50 times and you're adjusting frame by frame. You're like, ooh, he needs 2 more frames on that side. Oh, that needs to be faster. That needs to be slower. A matter of frames. And I remember on season 2, I had a joke with Steve and Shirley MacLaine. And I knew it just wasn't quite right. And the showrunner goes, that joke's just not quite right. I'm like, I know. And it was just a matter of adding a couple of tiny little frames to Steve, and then it worked. So it's definitely like a puzzle.
That's really fascinating for the editors in the audience. 1 frame or 2 frame could ruin a joke, or save it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so Matt, we're going to talk about season 1, episode 3. In the early days, the characters are still being defined.
Right.
And an easy one. This episode was one of my favorites. It was Oliver with his Splash musical flashback.
Yeah.
But it was a great sequence where he's directing. The first time we see Oliver directing a play, which was a fantasy sequence of all the suspects admitting to murder. How was kind of like being on the ground floor developing Oliver's character, but it was also one of our first fantasy sequences.
Yeah, no, that was actually one of my favorite things to do with that season, and I was really excited about that. Martin Short I'm a huge fan of his, and was so excited to be able to work on that episode that featured him. And I think it was one of the first fantasy sequences that we had in it, and so that was concerning to me about you know, again, setting the tone for the series and what we were going to do. But you just sort of have to accept it and lean into it. And he was so good in it, and the other cast were so good in it. And we just had to play it for what it was, you know, play this Bob Fosse moment. You know, but it's Oliver. Completely wrong, first off, and but so confident. Yeah, it was really fun, and the director did such a good job on that. Yeah, so she did, you know, a tremendous transition into the fantasy with the murder board splitting and us going inside of it.
Well, it's interesting you said that because the show, they're always wrong. Like for every episode, it was actually establishing what you were going to do for the rest of the show. That each week they're gonna kind of blow it.
Right.
And, now, Shelly, you mentioned Shirley MacLaine. One of my favorite things is the amount of celebrity cameos that we talked a little backstage. How celebrities want to do the show more than probably anything in the world. But that Shirley MacLaine episode really was very special because you had great comedic moments with Shirley. Mm-hmm. But also Steve finding out his father had an affair and kind of destroying his view of the acting world. How do you approach having a great artist like Shirley MacLaine and then trying to balance it with such a dramatic moment?
Yeah.
I thought it was one of my favorite moments.
Well, and Shirley is really close with our showrunner, John Hoffman. So they have a, you know, very endearing friendship. But I would say with all of our kind of huge celebrity moments, I do get nervous. And there have been times where I had to stop, have a glass of wine, wait till the sun sets, and then get into the scene and not let myself get in the way of it. And I think I just, you know, really follow the actors. I followed what Shirley was doing and followed what Steve was doing. I tend, especially with like legends like Steve and Marty and like last season Eugene Levy and all that stuff, you know, I tend to follow them, follow their timing, follow their lead, look at what they're doing as my blueprint for the scene, and then I'll go in and kind of put my own touch on it. But I really take my lead from them.
Okay, so Matthew, question. Editors, I ask this editor's question a lot. You have a murder mystery, obviously, for the entire season. Do you want to know who the killer is while you're early in the episodes so you can map out the season, or do you want to be more like the audience because you're afraid you might give something away?
Well, we always do know. So I haven't had the option on this, although it's reminded me, I worked on the first season of The Good Place, and they kept it a secret, what happens at the end of The Good Place, from everybody except for Kristen and Ted. The actors, the staff. And so I fought with Mike Schur about so many details. I'd be like, we don't need this. This is just, it's extra. And he'd be like, no, I think it's a nice little thing. And it was all serving that we were going to find this reveal. I actually saw him at the premiere of last season because his wife writes on Only Murders. And the first thing out of his mouth, I hadn't seen him in years, and he was like, yeah, you're always complaining to me about taking out certain moments, but it all paid off in the end. I was like, yeah, it did paid off. So in that case, I'm glad I didn't know. Although it would have made our relationship, we didn't fight, I would just be like, I don't understand, why do we need this moment? So it's helpful, I think, on Only Murders to know. Because there are things that we have to seed throughout the season that people need to know, but we also need to know ourselves not to overdo it and make it obvious about what's coming.
Yeah, because you got a lot of misdirections.
Yes.
You know, it's interesting about The Good Place. I remember interviewing Kristen Bell and Ted Danson before the pilot. And like, you lied to me, guys. You didn't tell me the truth, and that was sweet. They did a good job, even knowing.
Yeah. We were all pretty surprised that we pulled that one off.
So, all right, so a little season 4, episode 1. And at one challenge, the editor sets a tone for the season, the director and the editor especially. New narrator, character folks, a new visual style of storytelling. You edited the premiere. What was it like taking our building and Steve and Marty and Selena to LA and merging Hollywood with New York?
Oh, so much fun. We were excited to get out of the building and have a new set and kind of give it a little LA flavor, and it was just fun, you know, new locations, opened up the show, kind of gave a little contrast between LA and New York. It was, we picked that little From New York to LA kind of vintage song, and it was so much fun.
Now, Matthew, you took we could also talk about an opening, which we have a clip for. a very stylized opening. I will give you a hint to the audience, and I've taught film students. This is the type of thing film students would do to me all the time. They would make this type of opening. So we're going to take a look.
So good.
What was that?
All right, so that was awesome. So Matthew, how was it kind of having fun and doing a whole new stylized documentary style student film? A lot of things going on there.
This was a fantastic episode. I was really, at first I was really daunted because I read the script and I thought, this is going to be tough. Like, how is this going to happen? But our director, Jessica Yu, and our cinematographer, Kyle, how do you say his last name? Wolfschlager. Did an amazing job using different cameras, and they even used actual Super 8 cameras, which I thought, how does that even work? The sound sync was a nightmare, but it was really fun, and it was especially great for me as an editor because as much as the writers had made this, they created all this great content, there was a lot of room in there, and I had come from editing unscripted and documentary type things, so I'm very used to taking bits and pieces of things and trying them. And even back when I did that sort of thing, I was a frustrated filmmaker trying to make narrative films. So I would put these pieces together in the most narrative way possible. And that's essentially what I had to do here. And there was lots of room to play and make things up and interpret what a bad student film looks like, which I know what a bad student film looks like because I've made lots of them. So I just went back to those instincts. And I just also point out, like, little things, like it wasn't scripted to open on a curtain, but it was my homage to Lynch. But I thought, well, what kind of curtain would they have? And then we got stock footage of a glistening curtain, and it also went in with their sort of 50s movie vibe a little bit. But yeah, so I got to put that kind of stuff in, and everyone seemed fine with it. So it was really great. A lot of little details were added after, and a lot more flexibility on this one than other ones.
Yeah, I could definitely, because that was just definitely a standalone episode. And,
Yeah.
And those brothers, sisters are great
The
filmmakers.
brothers, sisters are, they're a treat. They're really great. And I also, it was in season 1, the boy from Apartment, and I remember 6B. That was an amazing episode and a bit of a standalone episode, and so I felt like I had to match it as best I could in terms of quality.
I can tell you that we were all glad it was him and not us, because we did not want to deal with all of that.
All right, so we're going to talk a little actors, Shelly. All right, so Selena Gomez, to me, I think has a lot of ways the most difficult job. The younger person playing with the older, they could have gone a lot of bad directions, I think. But she's amazing, and she pulled it off. What does she give you as an editor? Like, what does Selena give very special about her, so actors could learn from, or students that are watching, that she does in her performance that makes your job easier?
Oh gosh, she is that deadpan kind of character. She'll give us a little bit of variety from time to time, but she's always present. She's always on. She's always got great takes. I don't know. She's Mabel. She's Mabel, and I think because of her closeness to Marty and Steve, you feel it. Like in real life, they're very close. So you feel that with their characters, that translates.
So Matthew, obviously Steve Martin and Martin Short have no comedy experience. And Selena's been teaching them how to act. And so when they don't listen to her, how do you fix Steve Martin and Martin Short in editing?
It's tough. It does come down to frames. What's nice about Selena is she's really progressed. I mean, she's always been good, but I think she was probably a little intimidated that first season. But now we're actually in the middle of we're doing season 5 right now, and she's just really comfortable and that makes all the difference in how the three of them interact with one another. So it's been really nice to see her growing and improving and getting better at what she does.
As for Steve and Marty, though, those two together, I mean, they have such a long history together. How is that, for both of you, what do you think, how does that make it easier for you that they have some kind of major comedy history together, and they really kind of work together, probably call each other out too when things don't work, but how has that been for you guys?
I think the biggest shock for me coming on to season 2, I thought Steve was going to be the wild and crazy guy, like all the time, and he's very studious and hard on himself. I'm like, who is that? What? Like, I was a little sad at first because he was so strict with himself and hard on himself. And Marty would get him to laugh and crack up and say, oh, you goofed that up again, Steve, you're no good. And then he would laugh a little bit. But that was the biggest shock for me, is how, and then the tiniest little gag Steve does, the director would say, he rehearsed that for weeks. I'm like, Steve Martin rehearsed that for weeks? Like, what? So all the work that goes into being Steve Martin, it was a revelation.
Interesting. Well, we have a little treat for a clip. We have an interesting clip of Steve Martin doing a musical performance. But Shelly's also given us something. What do you want to call it?
I don't know do you want to show that?
It's your call. Do you want to show it? We can do it. We have the time. But what would you call that minute? What is that?
So the 1.5 was like a prototype for how he was going to do the song, the Pickwick Triplet song. So before we shot it, we knew it was going to be split screen, but in order to figure out what to shoot and how the images were going to fit into the squares, the two directors wanted to mock it up with title cards. So we had the song. So Steve went into recording with our music producers, and they did a version of the song like weeks and weeks before we shot that episode. So we kind of mocked it up to see how it feels and where we were going to cut before we even photographed.
So good. Okay, so there's so much going on there. You've got the great background actors freaking out about Steve Martin. Can he blow it? Because if you watch the show, he's been blowing it all season with the White Room. Marty doing his thing. Meryl Streep turning. You can see Meryl Streep being fearful, turning happy, sad. A lot of emotion. How does one edit such a complex sequence, mixing that together?
You know what? The prep really, really helped. Like, having an idea of what we were going to do and where we had to be was like golden. So that was fantastic. The Steve stuff was fun, obviously. That was the easiest part of it. But yeah, I don't know. I think kind of knowing, having heard that song about 500 times before they shot it, and then kind of getting that footage and trying to hit beats and kind of do it kind of rhythmically. It was still an experimentation when we got the footage, but it was so much fun. And then working in conjunction with the musical team. So we had a separate musical team from our normal composer that did these songs. So the songwriting team for this, they're like acclaimed Broadway songwriters, and Benji and Justin that won the Emmy for the song, they became EGOTs, Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony winners with this song. So there was that too. So yeah, there was just so much great love and fun going into it. We all just had the best time.
But it's interesting as the editor, I'm curious, the editor's choice, we talked about frames earlier, how Meryl was smiling and all happy. How do you guys decide when, because you had to turn her on that one, how much, like, when is it you don't want to do too early, because you ruin the kind of fun of it, but you also don't want to do too late? Was there a struggle with that part?
Not so much because of the scripted nature and kind of figuring that out beforehand. So again, like, that's the most prep I've ever done for something on murders like that. So we had spent a few weeks prior to that blocking that out, so we kind of knew, we could see in advance, even with those title cards, like, oh, we need this or that, or oh, we've got to take this turn, and we would have meetings with production about it.
How many takes does Steve do?
Not that many, shockingly. They didn't have time. It was like the end of the day, and they had this big song, and they only could do a few takes. And then what was interesting, we didn't do in editing, but our sound and music editors, Steve's final performance was a combination of the pre-recorded song he had done, the live, when he performed it live, they record that. So there's syllables and words that are live, pre-record, and then he wanted to come back in and do a little bit of ADR for some of the words. So it's 1,000 edits in his performance, his vocal performance, to perfect it.
That was perfect.
Yeah.
All right, so Matthew, you had fun. You got Steve, Selena, and Marty, and then you have their doppelgangers in the season. Yeah. Eugene Levy, Zach Efron, and Evan Lagar. How fun was it editing sequences, mixing those 6 people together and having some fun with that?
It was great. It was interesting because we kind of switched from the main trio being the comedic pieces in that to the doppelgangers became the comedic pieces, and our main trio was going through an identity crisis about what people thought of them and how people perceive them, because these, there's people that were going to play them were saying, oh, here's how I'm going to play you, here's how I see you, and they had to contend with that, and it was giving them, some crises of identity. And so it's shifted the dynamic, and it also, in episode 3, it kind of put them apart, and they were these two-handers, like these 3 different stories going on of, trying to solve the mystery separately. And it was just fun. And also having amazing doppelgangers didn't hurt.
And how about for you? I was really struck with Selena and Eva Longoria.
Yeah.
Because I thought also, in some ways it was comedic, but it was also very dramatic because Mabel was, out of all 3, struggling with someone playing her.
Right.
Like Steve and Marty kind of like. Marty definitely loved it. But what was it for you with Selena and
I
Eva?
think for Selena and Eva, they got along so well, and Eva was so strong on camera. I had not worked with her before, had her in any shows, and she was just such a delight to come on and kind of be the strong kind of role model for Mabel. So I found that very interesting and very lovely to edit.
Okay, so Matthew, we talked about some fun sequences. Is there any sequence that was most challenging for you that we haven't talked about? Something that says like, wow, and you're really proud of, like, I pulled that off. I'm really excited.
Well, the episode 6 was really challenging because it required kind of figuring out things in a new way. So for instance, normally when we have standard footage, we can kind of control the comedic pace and the dramatic pace with these frames and cutting from different coverage, but in episode 6, there's a lot of things that are covered in what look like single takes of a whole scene, but there are ways to go in there and use different pieces of things. So there's, I would say, almost every scene in that episode that looks like it's a single take is actually several takes. Okay. And then what the challenge was, well, how do I keep the comedic pace? Because you can tighten things and you can do certain things, but I had to sort of figure out and use other tools like sound. And one of the big things I kind of figured out early on with that episode is that, a lot of the footage that we're seeing is Howard doing a documentary. He's doing this brother-sister documentary, but now he's working for them, but he's got the camera. And he's there and he's in the room, and Howard's not someone who's going to just keep quiet the whole time. But in terms of production, the actor didn't speak because he didn't want to speak over lines, but I think he's going to be rambling and reacting. And so we recorded a lot of reactions and little words and lines and things, and we just started filling it up, and that helped keep the pace of the comedy up. There weren't any dead spots, and we were adding little jokes because, Howard's a funny character, and he might have a very funny reaction to this that wasn't scripted. So we were peppering it, and throughout the whole process, from the beginning to the end, we're looking for places to just fill and keep things moving.
How about you, Shelly? Obviously, aside from the Pickwick triplets we talked about, was there any kind of sequence that was most challenging and most rewarding, actually, when you pulled off?
Yeah, I think the season 2 finale, they shot like almost 56 hours of footage for that episode, for a 30-minute episode. So my assistant, who's now become an editor, Peyton Koch, we did it together. So that finale where they revealed the killer, just the amount of angles and characters and the amount of footage you had, we would map it out and then watch it without sound over and over to see if we're in the right place, or are we looking at the right person, or do the angles even make sense? So it took us a little bit longer. We had to beg for more time. But it came off well. We got one note from Steve Martin, and there was a shot of him doing his goofy stuff, and he just wanted it wider to see the whole body movements. And so we took that as a victory to get that one note for that big, long killer reveal party scene.
Is it hard because you've done multiple season finales? Is it kind of getting more and more challenging where you have to come on a clever way to reveal the killer?
They each have their different challenges, yeah, and I think it depends on the footage. It's been the same director, Jamie Babbitt, and so that's great. She didn't shoot that much footage for the other 2 episodes, thank God.
Right.
And a question for both of you, because we never want to give anything the next season. Who's the killer?
You cannot tell.
Shelly's the killer. It's... So, okay, well, I have a question. Past work, you worked on Veep with Julie Louis-Dreyfus. How do you think that prepared you, you know, because Julie's a comic genius, and that show was such an innovative, clever show. How do you think it prepared you to jump on Only Murders as a, you know, a comedy?
It's funny because when I started out, I had dreamed of working on really great quality shows with great quality actors, and as that opportunity became more and more available to me, you think about you're going to get intimidated by it, you're not going to know what to do, but the truth is, in the end, you just sit down and do your job, and you just have better material to work with. And so I've been really lucky to work with some really high quality actors, and that in particular, like I was a fan of the show before I had worked on it. And what I didn't realize was, obviously she's a genius, but everybody in that cast was a genius. And so, you have so many scenes with 5, 6 people in it, and they're always on, they're always doing something funny. Even if they're just listening to what's going on around them, they're all doing something amazing. And that's the sign of a really good actor. And so in terms of preparation, what it did is it just made me start looking at the footage for the best possible combination of shots to put together, and also look for missed opportunities or things that we can add that we wouldn't normally add. Because on the comedies, a lot of times you go to the person who's talking, and if you're lucky to work on something like Veep or like Only Murders, there's like a cinematic aspect to it. You can play around with the visuals and find comedy and emotion in the visuals as well. So it just made me ready for great performances and good writing.
And you were, Shelly, you were assistant editor of one of my favorite directors, Nora Ephron. A comedic genius and dramatic genius. What was the experience kind of learning, the ropes under that?
I mean, I count myself so lucky. I've done 2 Nora Ephron movies. I worked with James L. Brooks. I worked on a Mike Nichols movie. So I had these experiences with these, wonderful icons, and Nora was like such a strong leader of coming from a female perspective as well. She was very inclusive. Everybody ate lunch together. Everybody talked. Everybody was, part of the team. So I feel like that instilled that in me, and I try to operate that way today myself.
So, all right, so speaking of that, a question for each of you. I mentioned we do have a lot of students in the audience, watch. If you were going to recommend a film for editing, like you should study this film for editing, or television show, whatever, because everything's now merging, as we know, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, I can't even answer that.
The first thing that pops into my head is one of my favorite movies, right, that has been for a while, is I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which is a Charlie Kaufman movie that's on Netflix. And it's what I just love the editing in it, because it's so seamlessly, it's sort of a fantastical, it seems like it's grounded in reality, but things are odd in a way that you don't understand why they're odd, and things are shifting in a way. And the first time I watched it, I was blown away by it, and then I had to watch it a bunch more times to see, how did they do that with a cut, change from one reality to the next, and as an audience member, you have to kind of catch up with it. I'm fascinated by that movie. But it's a very unusual and unique movie. It's not something you're going to go and emulate somewhere else, but you can learn from it because it's pretty amazing.
Okay, but I know what I tell people, and I tell my assistants. I'm like, watch everything. Watch old movies, new movies, comedies, dramas, horror. I don't like horror, but I will watch it. Like, watch anything and everything, TV shows, talk shows, like anything. And be present and listen. I'm always like, be watching and listening. Like I mostly drive my car without music or sound because I'm listening to car buys, or at a stop sign, I'm listening to someone else's music coming from their window. Like, I'm trying to be present of everything around me.
Is that something for the students then you would recommend? Because a lot of students start with short film, obviously.
Yeah.
Is that something, don't lock yourself into one genre? Like, kind of, you
Absolutely.
don't think, like, I only can do this, you're not opening your mind?
Absolutely. Yes. And I think I had a couple of 5, 6 years, 7 years in the Ryan Murphy world where they didn't care what genre you worked in. They're just like, what script do you want to do? Horror, comedy, drama, whatever. They didn't look at you or pigeonhole you as a certain type of editor. You're an editor, so you could edit whatever you want to edit.
Which is unusual. Like, you usually get pigeonholed into doing, very specific things.
Okay, well, Sally's all the time we have today. I would like to announce we have solved the murder. It was you. I want to thank all you non-murderers in the audience for coming, and also a great pleasure has been talking to you two today and sharing your insights into only murders in the building.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.